everybody, to yet another live interview show with Become a Fearless Father. And today I am live with John Barrows. Thank you so much for being on. We've been emailing on and off, trying to get this set up.
Yeah.
And then I was like, you know what? We just got to hop on, because if we're going to wait until February, it might not happen.
Exactly. I appreciate you sticking with me on this. I know both our schedules are pretty crazy.
Exactly. But I was so excited when you wrote me that you wrote a book together with your daughter. I was like, man, I got to have this guy on my show. So let's start off with that, man. What made you decide, like, look, let's go crazy. I'm going to write a book together with my daughter.
Yeah, it was funny. I've been doing this now, sales training now for about 10 years now, 11 years or so. And I've gotten to the point where a lot of people are asking, John, when are you going to write a book? And I think this is one of those industries where everybody writes a book so they can say they wrote a book. And I just have a disdain for that approach, right? Just doing it just to do it. And also, I think, to be quite honest, I think most sales books specifically, but books in general are fluff, right? There's like 80% fluff and 20% good content, right? But they have to fill it up with that fluff so they can get it this thick so they can sell it for $24.99. And I just didn't want to do that. And so, I'm sitting there thinking, I went to a Gary Vee session a while back, and he, it was the 4D session where you sat there and he, all his executives come in and show you what they're doing. And they walk you through the why exercise, like why, right? Which is an important exercise to go through for everybody. And it was a really important time for my business because I was really trying to figure out that next step. And I ended up coming up with my why, which was sales done right? Because I fundamentally believe when sales is done right, it's the greatest profession in the world. When done wrong, it's the worst. So that was for me and my company. And then as I started to translate that to, okay, well, what would I do for a book? It really was hard for me to write because I'm like, what am I going to write that hasn't been written before? But a little while, 2 years ago, my daughter started selling, she got into Girl Scouts and she started selling Girl Scout cookies. and we were talking, and so I was teaching her how to sell. And I've always, I've said there's one thing, I figured out a lot of things in business, but the one thing I've always had a hard time with is because I travel, I do about 90 sessions a year. I travel about 140 days a year. I cannot, like the guilt of leaving my daughter specifically is brutal. Like I just can't figure out a way to deal with just to shut that emotion off. Right. So I figured, like, how can I get her involved a little bit more in what I do? I mean, I work out of my house, but that's not really getting her involved. So as she was selling Girl Scout, I'm like, hey, this is a good opportunity. Right. So we did a little video because she came to me. She goes, John, Daddy, you have a really big social media presence. She's like, I got a link here where people can buy cookies online from me. Could you share it out there? Right. And I was like, no. And she's like, what? I was like, no, I'm not going to just share it out there. I'm like, you got to earn this. I go, plus, why would anybody out there buy cookies from you compared to every other kid in their neighborhood or that they're related to asking them to buy cookies, right? So she's like, well, what do I do? I go, well, you got to give your pitch. Like, why should, right? So we practiced a little video, right, of her giving her pitch of why she, right? So and I wrote a blog post on next year. We went door to door selling, taught her how to deal with objections, those type of things. Nice. And I was like, you know what? That is that's a perfect story because it's really the authentic, like true, like kids are some of the best sales reps I've ever come across in my life. Right. And I fundamentally believe that I want to change the perception of sales in a different way by introducing it to kids in a positive way early. So the idea is to elevate the profession by introducing it to kids, because no kid ever says, I want to be in sales when I grow up. No kid ever says that. Right. I want to change that. And also I want to get more women into sales because I think women are some of the best sales professionals I've ever come across. So that's why it's based on my daughter. And then the third part about it is 100% of the profits go to charity. And it's funny because my daughter actually doesn't want to be in sales when she grows up. She wants to be a veterinarian. So all profits go to World Wildlife Fund, which is her favorite charity. Yeah, so we're going down. Actually, I'm super psyched. We're going down for Thanksgiving. My parents live in Virginia, and the World Wildlife Fund is based in DC. And so we're going to go down to their office, hand them like a big check, right? My daughter's going to be giving it to him. So kind of round out the whole experience, which has been it's been awesome, with her helping her write it and just along the way. And now having something that we can go talk to people. We did a reading this weekend at a Barnes and Noble. Nobody showed up, but it was fun. You know what I mean? Like it was just some cool stuff. So
that's awesome, man. That's great. So, wow, lots of stuff in there to continue talking about, man. Before we go into all of that, share us a little bit. Who's John Barrows? What's your background story? And how old? We know now you got a daughter. Show us her age. That's important so people can get an understanding. You have one daughter, right? That's it. No sons, no daughters, more. Okay, cool. And tell us a little bit about your marriage as well, so people can get a full picture, right?
Yeah, I appreciate it. So she's 9. She just turned 9. Definitely, it's just we stopped with her because she was so cool that we were convinced that the second one was going to really be terrible. So we stopped at 1. But yeah, for me, I've been in about 43 years old now. I've been in sales for about 23 years. Got my degree. I grew up here in Boston, still live here. Got my degree in marketing because there was no degrees in sales back then. Stumbled into sales like everybody else, right? Started with DeWalt power tools, selling those, and then Xerox. That's where I really got my full sales education. I mean, talk about selling a commodity, right? And I sold to the government too, so I couldn't even negotiate on contract. Like my price was my price. That's why I learned solutions, or that's why I learned relationship selling and how to take rejection. Then I started a company with a few buddies of mine from high school. We did outsourced IT support for the SMB market. So, I was 25. I didn't know what I was doing. So I took every training there was, Sandler, Miller Hyman, you name it. I took this company called Basho, which was I loved the training because it was super tactical. So we ended up being the fastest growing company in Massachusetts for a few years in a row. Sold us, it was about 12 million in revenues, about 85 employees. Sold us off to Staples. Staples came and bought us. Apparently I'm not a corporate guy. I got fired, or they offered me another position, and looked for a new job. Basho said, "You want to be a trainer?" I didn't, because I didn't like trainers. Most trainers I had come across were either failed sales professionals or professional presenters. I didn't want to be that. And so they said, "Don't worry, you have to use these techniques to sell so you can train." Right. So that's all right. So I joined Basho, took on some bigger accounts, brought on some bigger ones. Then, make a long story short, they screwed it all up and I took it over. So now I'm working on my own. I'm working with some of the fastest growing tech companies: Salesforce, LinkedIn, Box, Dropbox, Slack, Google. Trained a lot of their sales teams on the techniques that I put out there. But I always say I'm not really a sales trainer. I'm a sales rep that happens to train. I get out there and I grind every day like everybody else. I'm making the calls, I'm sending the emails, I'm negotiating the contracts. So when I get up there and train people on stuff, it's about stuff that I'm doing, not stuff that I'm reading about doing. So yeah, and it's just, I think the entrepreneurial lifestyle was ingrained in me early by my parents, right? My mom was a consultant, my dad was a consultant. Even though I didn't know what it was, they both worked out of the house. So I always had that DNA in me. I definitely am unemployable at this point. I am way too much of a pain in the ass. So that's why I kind of have to work for myself. But, I'm just trying to do things the right way, trying to keep building a good company, trying to do the right thing. Slowly but surely building this out. My wife, she actually is she runs her own little company. She's over there and the other part of the house. She's an environmental consultant though. She works on climate change and sustainability. Yeah. So, I think both of us are in pretty, I don't want to say recession proof jobs, but everybody's got to sell no matter what. And also the environment ain't getting any better. So I think job security is all right for both of us, but you got to keep doing the right thing. So.
Exactly. Love it, man. Thanks for sharing that. So yeah, that's what I was thinking, man, before hopping on. It's like, man, actually anything and everything in life, in the end, it comes at one point or another, it comes down to sales.
Yeah.
Is that right?
I mean, you've heard it before, right? If it's not sold, it doesn't happen. I mean, and that's what it's funny because in the book, right? So just to give a little bit, go back to that for a second. It's like, it starts with Charlotte, my daughter. Charlie's at school and she picks it's career day, right? So she and all the kids have to pick a career out of the hat to write a report on. And kids get a fireman and police officer and all the typical stuff. And then she picks out sales and she's like, "Oh, sales, what is this?" Right? So she goes home, she's all bummed out. And mommy and daddy, me and my wife, we're like, "Oh, what's the matter?" She's like, "I gotta write a report on sales. I don't even know what it is." And what we go through with her, we're like, "Well, let's talk about it for a second. Sales is all around us. If you think about it," and in the book you see this butter dish, and you say, "Look, this butter dish, like somebody had to sell somebody the materials so that they could make this butter dish. And then they had to sell it to the store so that we could then go buy it from the store so that we don't have butter on our hands." Because if you literally think about, pick up anything that is around you, that backdrop, you bought that, you know what I mean? Somebody made that to buy, you know what I mean? So literally this microphone, every piece of this microphone, somebody had to sell it to get the materials, to make it, to buy it, to whatever. So it literally is all around us. And if you look at it, like, I think so many people look at sales in such a negative way because of the way it's portrayed in the movies. And also rightfully so, this is not an educated profession. Most people, it's the default profession. right? They go to school to get degree, whatever they wanted to get their degree on when they thought they wanted, at 18 years old, they could define their life. And then they get out and they realize either, oh, I don't want to do this, or B, I can't make enough money doing this. So, hey, I heard you can make some money in sales. I'm pretty good with people. And what happens is they get into sales because low barrier to entry, right? Mm-hmm. But what happens is most companies don't give a lot of training, okay? So they give a kid a territory and they give them a quota and a commission structure. And they say, go. Now, you take a relatively normal kid who's doesn't lie, doesn't cheat, doesn't steal, right? Normal, ethical person. But then you give them a quota, you give them a commission structure, and you give them go. And that kid realizes that if they don't sell, they're not going to make any money. So they won't be able to feed themselves. And they'll probably get fired. You take a relatively normal kid, and that kid will do some abnormal things to get, you know what I mean? Like they'll cut some corners. Yeah. And so rightfully so, the perception of sales is pretty negative because there's such a lack of education, which again goes back to my book. I feel like if you teach kids early, they could actually treat it as an actual profession and go into it. So when they come out of college, they're actually a sales professional, not just a default sales rep.
Yeah.
Right.
I like that. But again, sales is everywhere. Like you don't even have to say like I'm going to be a salesman or a sales rep or a sales VP or whatever it is. I mean, even for me, like, I don't call myself anything within sales, but I got to sell. I got to sell myself, right? As a coach, I got to sell. I'm coming out with a new product soon. I got to sell that. Yep. So you always got to be selling. So you got to have the mindset. By the way, and nobody knows this yet because I never shared this, I also worked for Xerox. I enjoyed it. They have one of the best sales trainings out there, at least that's from what I saw.
Yeah, they did. I don't know if it's still true, but yeah, back in the day, 20 years ago, I graduated and I took that training and I didn't know how good it was until I went on when I started interviewing, and people would be like, whoa, wait a minute, you've gone through the sales, the Xerox, 8-week sales training program. I'm like, yeah, I guess. Right. So, but yeah, that's it. I mean, it taught me how to sell.
Exactly. What I like as well from what you just shared is that now that you were thinking like, okay, I'm in sales, people telling me I need a book, but you're kind of like, nah, I don't want this, right? And then besides that, you feel guilty, which is normal, right? I saw your post, and I love the fact that you were so open and honest about that, because I think a lot of entrepreneurial dads, or a lot of dads in general, feel that. But we're so afraid as dads to share that. We'll go into that a little bit more later on. But one of the things, and then you decide, okay, so maybe unconsciously or consciously, how can I solve all this? And you're like, okay, so I'm going to start this project. Besides that, which is great for your daughter and your relationship, besides that, now you also decide, okay, so every single cent that we're going to make of this, we're going to donate to a good cause. So now you're teaching your daughter not just about sales, but also about giving. Right, which is so important, and especially the more I look around me, I'm like, dude, please. If somebody teaches kids how to give, that's powerful. That's amazing. So, where does that come from? How did you figure out? It's like, okay, this is the way that we're going to do it. For example, how do the conversations with your daughter go to come up with all of that? Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. It just was pretty natural. I mean, I've been pretty fortunate in my career. I've always wanted to give back more than I do. You know what I mean? Like, I early in my career, I was always like, well, once I start making this much money, then I'll really start giving back. You know what I mean? But that's a fool's errand, because you're always chasing what's that level, right? That's going to make you comfortable. And I took a lot from, Mark Benioff, Salesforce. I've been working with Salesforce for, 11 years now or so. And, he's got that 1-1-1 philosophy, which is when he started Salesforce, he decided he was going to give 1% of profits, 1% of time, and 1% of product away for free, right? To charities, right? And I just really always thought that was a pretty cool approach. And so for me, I've always looked for things like I started my online store that has all this gear and stuff. And because I wanted to give back to, before this book, and 100% of the profits from this go to my veterans, a charity for veterans. And then so with this, and, I have gotten to a point in my career, I'm not rich by any stretch. I mean, I do well. I'm not like independently wealthy and can, just all of a sudden start sailing on a yacht and never having to work again. But I do consider myself pretty fortunate. And so this was just an opportunity to kind of say, it's relatively short dollars at the end of the day when you look at it, to invest in something like this, to make a book. And it just felt better. And also one of the reasons, one of the lessons of sales in the book is it is not about always making money, right? It's really about helping people, right? And I'm just a big believer in what goes around comes around. And so if you help people out, stuff will come back around eventually, right? I mean, just the overwhelming support that I've gotten for this has been payback for the cash outlay that I made for this. It's tenfold what I would expect. And so, and it just, I felt like, and she's always, my wife got her into modeling early on. So she has a bunch of commercials and stuff like that. And she gets paid quite well for them. And so, I got a 9-year-old girl that has more in her bank account than I do, for crying out loud. So, so I think she's kind of caught that, like, hey, money isn't everything mentality. And it just felt right to give it back. And it also felt right for me to promote it in a way, because I was thinking, I'm like, oh yeah, I want to give some to charity, but what am I going to carve off a percentage, like 20%, 50%, 80%? But like, okay. And nobody gets rich off of making books. You know what I mean? So I just felt kind of like, all right, if I'm going to do it, I might as well do it. And so that's where it really came from. And it just makes it easier to talk about it too, right? Because now it's just like, look, it goes to charity. It's a $15 book that goes to charity. So, like, I'm not negotiating with you on this. I'm not, it's just a feel good thing. Right. And a lot of my partners and people who are in this ecosystem, love it. Like, I'm getting like Sales Loft. They sponsored 200 books at a Women in Sales Pros thing that I did. You know what I mean? It's just like, it makes other people feel good to get involved with it too. And that's really why I wanted to do it as well. So.
Yeah, I love it, man. I'm big in giving. Like, it's very important for me. And for me at the moment, it's a lot of time. So I do a lot of free coaching for guys that are in a situation that I know they need the help, and I know for a fact that they don't have the money. It's like, yeah, we got to do this, right? It's so important. And I'm trying to get the kids involved as well as much as possible, because they need to learn as soon as possible that it's not about you. It's about a bigger purpose in life and doing good in this world. And the faster we can teach our kids that, the better. So, man, again, props. Love it.
Yeah, thanks, man. And I think the other thing here is you got to realize that, look, there was a video that I saw on YouTube, and you can Google it. It's the guy holds up, it's about privilege, right? And a lot of people are, I'm not privileged, whatever. And what he does is he lines up all these people on the baseline of a field, and he has $100 bill. Have you seen this one? And he's like, hey, I want you, like, whoever wins this race gets $100. And everybody's like, all right, good. But he's like, before that, if your parents are still married, take a step forward. Right? Some people take a step forward, some people don't. If you went to college and you didn't have to pay for it, take a step forward, right? If you and he literally goes through all these basic things that somebody like me, for instance, would take for granted. You know what I mean? Like, I sit there and think, I've worked hard for what I've got. I've earned everything, but I've also been put in a very fortunate situation where I was born into a family that cared. You know what I mean? My parents are still married. They did pay for my college education. You know what I mean? So yeah, I was put in a position to win the, and that whole video is, by the time he says go, there's like 3 people who are almost on the finish line. Yeah. So if you don't recognize that and go back and try to help people that aren't as fortunate or didn't have those things that you did, I think something's wrong with you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree. And I think he makes them look back to actually see, like, look how fortunate you are. Look at the steps ahead in life that you have already. No, absolutely true. So I'm glad you brought that up. Let's talk about something else, man. That's very important to me, because you mentioned, like, you're through your journey with your daughter to go and sell cookies door to door. Now you're teaching her how to deal with objections, right? I think that's one of the biggest things, because a lot of it is, like, being an entrepreneur is all about how to deal with objections and how to deal with negative people, haters, whatever you want to do it, right? So what's the strategy in there? What can we learn from you right now that will help any entrepreneurial dad out there listening to say, like, oh man, yeah, that's going to help me move forward?
Yeah, I think it's, so there's objections and then there's rejection, right? I think, I mean, rejection, you just got to accept the fact that, you're going to get 99 smashes in the face before you get that one. And that's why I love sales, right? I think entrepreneurial, like a lot of people are entrepreneurs, and they, to your point, like they might not consider themselves sales, but man, you have to be in sales. And therefore you have to have that thick skin. You have to you have to understand your why. Like if you truly understand your why, then you can take a lot of rejection along the way, right? Because you understand that why you're doing what you're doing. Right. So that exercise, I think, is an imperative to help deal with rejection. Now, how to deal with objections, to me, it's my biggest recommendation, because I train on this, is just be proactive versus reactive. Like, don't wait for an objection to come and then kind of handle it however you feel like handling that day. Like you should be able to outline like if you go out there and start selling or whatever it is, within a week or two, you should write down, here's what you do. For 2 weeks, keep a notebook and literally write down every single objection you get. And I mean word for word. Like write it down. Did they say we don't have budget for this? Or did they say you're too expensive? Or did they say this isn't a budgeted thing? Like, what did they say? Okay. And get a laundry list, because everybody has this frequently asked questions document. I have a frequent objections document. Here's all the objections that I get, and here's the best responses for it. And then all you got to do, and I train on this, but go on Google and literally type in best objection handling techniques, right? And there's like 50 of them. They boil down to like feel, felt, found, right? Totally understand how you feel about that. Other people felt the same way. What they found was, right? You smooth that out. Don't say the words feel, felt, found. And then there's the clarification. And by the way, that's actually a biggest tip here for everybody is, and this is, I don't know if you follow Gong. Do you follow Gong, like the Gong blog?
No.
So Gong, gong.io/blog. It's the best blog I've ever read in my life. It's data-driven analysis on what works and what doesn't work. And they say they compare the best reps to average reps. And they say that the best reps answer an objection 56% of the time with a question. Average reps answer it 32% of the time with a question. So unless the objection is blatantly obvious and the answer is blatantly obvious to it, what you want to do when somebody says you're too expensive, what do you mean by that? Compared to what? Like my favorite answer to what do you mean by, I'm sorry, my favorite answer to you are too expensive is compared to what? Compared to not doing anything? Compared to my competition? Compared to, you know what I mean? Like compared to what? Because I want to understand what you're comparing. Like that's a broad objection. And too many times people answer the objection. And when you answer the objection, you look defensive. You know what I mean? Like when you, no, we're not too expensive. Let me tell you why, right? Like you're coming off as defensive. But if you just seek to understand where that objection's coming from, all of a sudden, you get them talking and then they start to unravel their objection. And then you start to realize that's not really an objection. Like you're just saying that just, you know what I mean? Like you're maybe just doing that to blow me off. So if there's feel, felt, found, there's the clarification technique, there is the justification. So, wow, John, $100,000, that's ridiculous. And instead of backing off, let me explain you why we're $100,000. Then there's the reprioritization, which is, look, I understand cost is an issue. Is it more important than, right? Trying to, whatever that goal was. And then there's the preemptive strike, where the objection's coming, you just use it before they do, right? So it's like, hey, I know you weren't expecting my call, so I'll be brief. Right, on a cold call or something like that. And if you are the most expensive, you could say, hey, look, I just want to let you know before we even get started in this conversation, if price is the number one consideration for what you're looking for as far as this is concerned, we can make this conversation pretty cheap. We are not the cheapest by any stretch, and we don't want to be. Let me tell you why, right? So you literally take the objection away from them. So now you got those 5: feel, felt, found, reprioritization, clarification, justification, and preemptive strike. Write down an objection that you're getting absolutely destroyed on. Come up with 2 different ways of handling that objection. The next 10 times it comes up, deal with it that way. Next 10 times, deal with it that way. See which one yields a higher response rate.
Nice. I like that. That's hands-on right there. Anybody can use that. Appreciate that. Dude, man, I told you, we got to do it short. So this is the first time that we're doing 25 minutes. Actually, no, it's not the first time, but it's definitely for this show. I got this one. That's your website. It's in the comment section for the people, or in the description section for that matter. You can click on it and check John out. What are the good ways to get in contact with you if people want to have any other questions? Yeah. And before I forget, make sure to also mention where can people buy the book. That's actually really important.
I appreciate that. So JBarrows.com has pretty much everything. I mean, you'll see all my social feeds there. I mean, LinkedIn, you'll find me. That's probably where I'm most active. I got about 400,000 people follow me on there. So we put a lot of content out on that. Instagram handles John M as in Michael Barrows. And then the book, if you actually go to jbarrows.com/book, it'll take you to Amazon. You can go on Amazon, or if you want to see my daughter with her, those videos I was telling you about, it's a longer URL, but it's I want to be in sales when I grow up.com. So if you go to iwanttobeInSalesWhenIGrowUp.com, you'll actually see the videos of her doing her little pitch, us going door to door, and you know, kind of the story behind the story, and then that'll bring you to Amazon to take a look at it. So those are some of the places, and you know, and I give away, like, if you go on my website, between my resource library and my blog and those type of things, I probably give away 90% of my content. So you know, all the stuff that I train these companies on, you know, you'll probably be able to piece it all together if you had some time. I got a YouTube channel and that type of stuff too. So it's all meant to be very, like, that tip as far as split testing, different, you know, objection, like all the stuff that I put out there is like, hey, here's what to do. Here's like a technique, try this, you know, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but at least it'll give you something to do as opposed to some big theory or some process that you have to follow.
Exactly. Love it, man. Thank you. I appreciate that. So yeah, I put your website on top, so it's easy for people to get to the website. And yeah, I did myself. So scroll a little bit down, and then you can see all of the social medias and where you can find John. And John, again, thank you so much for taking the time for hopping on and sharing us, especially about the book, man. I was really interested in that, so thank you for that. And a couple of extra gold nuggets, how to deal with objections. So that's extra perfect. So appreciate that. Everybody else, thank you for being on live, watching the recording, or later on watching this or listening to this on the podcast on YouTube channel. That's great too. Appreciate all of you. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure that you put your heart here. And write an extra question. That's fine too. I mean, we can always make sure that John can come back and answer the questions, and share it with your friends. You know, show us some appreciation, show John some love. All right. Thank you, everybody, and have an amazing day, and talk soon. Bye-bye.
Cheers, man.